It's a film where a slave becomes a gladiator, then leads a revolt that almost destroys the Roman Empire, but it differs from Gladiator in two important ways. Firstly, the scope of this film is immense, and secondly, Gladiator is a bit crap and this film isn't. It's Spartacus. Before it was a meme, a TV series and a movie, Spartacus was a real-life slave who led a slave revolt in ancient Rome. More recently, Kirk Douglas was a huge star in his day and had wanted to be cast in 1959's Ben-Hur, but when that role went to Charlton Heston, Douglas decided, screw it, I'ma make my own epic.
Spartacus.
He produced the film he intended to star in from a script from blacklisted writer Dalton Trumbo. Lousy commies everywhere you look. Douglas insisted the writers be credited under their own names, in contravention of the blacklist, which was nice. The film opens with a narration talking about the evil of slavery. Spartacus was released in 1960, at that time not quite a century since slavery had been abolished in the US. Nostalgia is a hell of a drug. Spartacus is a Thracian slave, meaning he's a slave from Thrace in what is now northeastern Greece, a long way from Sparta, so already they're lying to us. He's also a biter, which piques the curiosity of Peter Ustinov's slave trader character Lentulus Batiatus, possibly the best performance in the film.
Tell me the truth.
Spartacus is sent to gladiator school, where he learns the art of gladiating, so he can gain a certification of gladiatorial arts which will allow him to start work as a junior gladiator, where he can work his way up to become senior gladiator, then principal gladiator, a term used to cheat experienced gladiators out of the title of lead gladiator, even though they have the experience to become lead gladiator. It's a scam.
Would you try to kill me? Yes, I'd kill.
Spartacus's slave girlfriend Varinia is sold off, which leads Spartacus to snap.
She's been sold.
No talking in the kitchen, slave.
Killing the lead gladiator and earning himself a promotion to lead gladiator and slave leader, but he still finds time to update his profile on LinkedIn. In the background of all this, we have some intrigue back at the Roman Senate.
I'll take a little Republican corruption along with a little Republican freedom, but I won't take the dictatorship of Crassus.
Laurence Olivier plays Crassus, a Roman senator whose rivalry with another senator, Charles Lawton's Gracchus, complicates efforts to defeat Spartacus's army.
Do you think I made you commander of the garrison to control some rock patch on Vesuvius? It was to control the streets of Rome.
In a scene that was originally cut and reinstated in the 1990s, we learn that Crassus likes both snails and oysters. I don't know what that means. Tony Curtis is Antoninus, his body servant. Oh. This lost scene was also missing the soundtrack, and Curtis came back to redub his lines, with Anthony Hopkins doing his legendary Olivier impersonation.
Do you consider the eating of oysters to be moral and the eating of snails to be immoral?
The slave revolt isn't a war against Rome per se. Spartacus merely intends to head to a port and send the slaves home on a fleet of ships, rented from pirates. So just like hiring a car at the airport. Spartacus is shocked I tell you, to discover that pirates have reneged on the deal without returning the deposit, just like hiring a car at the airport. What is the world coming to when you can't trust the word of a pirate, or a car rental agency? Crassus does a deal to take over Rome if he defeats Spartacus and his slave army, which he ends up doing fairly easily in a very bloody battle for a 60s film. There are some fairly gruesome shots, some that were reinstated in recent versions of the film, and scenes of the aftermath of the battle are rather brutal, just like the Hollywood awards show that seated guests alphabetically and had Jay Leno and David Letterman sitting next to each other. The defeated surviving slaves are to be crucified, but Crassus wants to know if Spartacus is dead, or one of the survivors, leading to the film's most iconic scene. In order to save their leader, everybody self-identifies as Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
Just like Varinia, there's a little bit of Spartacus in all of us. Crassus has taken Varinia and her newborn son with Spartacus into his household. Obviously, he's in an oyster mood.
I love you, Spartacus, as I loved my own father. I love you.
Gracchus, in one last shot at his victorious rival, arranges for Varinia and Spartacus Jr. to go into the witness protection program before, depending on which cut of the film you are watching, apparently committing suicide. Before leaving Rome behind, Varinia manages to speak to Spartacus, who is being crucified and possibly not in the chattiest of moods. Apparently he's got a very itchy nose and not being able to scratch it is just the worst.
You must answer when I speak to you.
Olivier as the sneering Crassus is marvellous, menacing without being outright evil. Just evil enough without going full Bond supervillain. Which makes you wish Olivier had played a Bond supervillain.
We've already been made to look a fool. Let's not add the trappings of a clown.
Charles Laughton as his rival Gracchus is equally watchable, a more natural performance from an actor who was once a major star.
In Rome, dignity shortens life even more surely than disease. The gods must be saving you for some great enterprise.
But it's Peter Ustinov who steals the show. He puts in just that little bit more into the character, which is why he rightfully won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor.
In spite of your vices, you are the most generous Roman of our time.
Vices?
Ladies.
Meanwhile, back at the Senate, Gene Simmons is Spartacus' wife Varinia, and the actress puts in a human performance, which is appropriate since Simmons has the most emoting to do, and she manages to keep things on the right side of melodramatic.
He was a man who began all alone, like an animal. Yet on the day he died, thousands and thousands would gladly have died in his place.
Kirk Douglas as Spartacus, inventor of the top knot, works best when he's not speaking. Not a diss, it's just that American accents always make these things feel cheesier, especially when you have Olivier in the cast. Tony Curtis as Spartacus' best mate in an early Hollywood bromance is probably one of Curtis's best dramatic performances.
I won't let them crucify you.
The original director of Spartacus, Anthony Mann, was fired after a week of shooting, and Douglas brought in someone he had worked with on Paths of Glory, Stanley Kubrick, in what was Kubrick's only film as a jobbing director. Kubrick, not always known for fast-moving films, keeps Spartacus humming along nicely, like a self-satisfied bumblebee who's just won Deal or No Deal. Gladiator was also 3 hours long, and they barely left the arena in that film, so it doesn't feel quite as epic as a film made 40 years earlier from which it borrowed so heavily. When TV started making inroads into cinema attendances, the movie business fought back with anything TV couldn't then match: colour, spectacle, and widescreen. A rash of biblical stories and sword and sandal films were released in the late 50s, with Spartacus being one of the last major big-budget successes of the genre. Meanwhile, back at the Roman Senate,
In every city and province, lists of the disloyal have been compiled. Tomorrow they will learn the cost of their terrible folly.
Spartacus was a lavish production, almost all made in camera, and modern viewers are rewarded with an entertaining film. Despite some chicanery regarding multiple releases and edits to the final scenes, Spartacus does what so few late 50s epics did: tell a simple story well and cast it with actors able to deliver lines that would sound cheesy coming from lesser talent. Imagine the terror of the other actors having to play a scene against Olivier, who is probably just slumming it for money. But if that's slumming it, then I'll take more. Spartacus is an evergreen story and in the public domain, which is why it's fair game for remakes, reboots, even musicals. But while the recent series has its fans, it's the 1960 epic that has endured in people's minds as the definitive version.
It seems like we've started something that has no ending.